Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of the Yet to Be Named podcast. My guest today is Julia Lurye from Horlick Condominium Law. She's a partner at the law firm, and she is an expert at shared facilities, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Why is Julia an expert? Julia is an expert because she is a mom of three girls who fight constantly, and the only lawyers who can actually deal with shared facilities are moms because that is the skill that you need to have to deal with this. Julia, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much. What an introduction, I have to say.
I'm a dad. It's exactly the same thing. If you can negotiate and mediate between like little girls in a playground, you can do shared facilities. It's a lot harder.
I think mediating with little kids is harder than shared facilities, though.
Absolutely. No, 100%. Doing anything with little kids is harder than like condo stuff. 100%. So shared facilities, a wonderful excellent setup that the developers have handed to us in Condoland. Reasonable people working together to run joint assets is a recipe for success all the time, as you know. But occasionally it doesn't work out so well. There's a lot of reasons for that, but let's hear your take on this. Why are shared facilities the bane of Condoland's existence?
I'll tell you this. First of all, I love working shared facilities. I absolutely love it. Because the problems are real. The disputes sometimes are silly, but they are certainly they're real to those people because it's their castle, so to speak. But it's a lot of people don't like it because the nature of the disputes might be, as I said before, might be silly. I had a situation whereby there was a massive dispute because the parties couldn't agree on the color of the flowers for the landscaping. One party wanted pink, another party wanted red. And this is what happens when you have different personalities, living in a small area whereby they have different priorities, they have different needs, and they have what's right for them might be wrong for somebody else. And so a lot of this also turns on principle, and a lot of this turns on feelings, perhaps. And
were the colors actually pink and red? Like, was it that close and that caused the dispute? Because I understand if it's like blue and yellow and it's like going to change the look. No, I still don't understand that, but it was pink and red. That was the dispute.
Actually pink and red. Yeah, it was actually pink and red. One party wanted red because they found it very passionate, very vibrant, and another party wanted pink because they liked
it's pretty pink flowers, of course.
Pretty pink flowers.
That probably cost what, $20,000-$30,000 in legal fees.
Significant legal fees. Yes. And this is actually a discussion I had with them at mediation, is that ultimately at the end of the day, is the color that important that you're willing to throw so much money at it? And it was a resounding yes. Yes.
It means that much to us. Well, you touched on a really interesting point. You said different motivations, and I'm going to jump to that because I was going to talk a little about like, we get sometimes difficult people on condo boards and we put them in bad situations where a developer makes something really unclear. Yeah. But this is really important, is that different motivations, is that not all shared facilities are between condo and condo. Like I think you mentioned, and I have one in my portfolio. We've got a condo that shares a parking garage with an apartment building. And the motivation is drastically different because the apartment building has one owner that wants to save all the money possible. And the condo, a wealthy group of people, want nice things. And so how do you reconcile that?
Great question. I had a very similar situation whereby I had one condo, same thing, tip-top shape, and another condo was just an absolute disaster. They haven't had an AGM in like 5 years. They just levied a special assessment. And so how do we bring the parties to that common ground? And really, ultimately, you look at, what are the obligations in the shared facilities agreement? What are the obligations and, what are the rights of the parties? And at the end of the day, just need to find some common ground and make sure that they adhere to their responsibilities.
No, we're going to sue. It's way more common. We're not going to do any of that stuff. We're going to sue. In this case, it actually did go to court before I arrived as the manager, but I arrived sort of on the tail end of a massive lawsuit. I don't know what it cost both parties, but they just couldn't get along because the motivation, part of it was personality, but the motivation was just drastically different from both sides. They didn't want the same thing. And even within the framework of the shared agreement, there's wiggle room and there's disputes over who's going to do the job. Do we want the cheapest possible vendor or do we want the guy with the great reputation? And how do you find the
Absolutely.
middle ground?
Absolutely. And then don't forget also is that, you know, mediation, arbitration, at the end of the day, that delays the resolution of the problem. And in doing so, it actually allows the other party more time to determine, hey, how are we going to raise these funds? And so sometimes, believe it or not, it's actually a strategic tactic to allow a party to raise the funds.
Yeah, and that brings me to another. I'm going to just spew out examples because I have so
Yeah,
many.
go.
Our friend Fred from Mississauga. So this is I run a commercial 4 unit little pediatrician's office inside of a residential building, and Fred is the president of the residential side. Fred
Mm-hmm.
is a how do I put it nicely? A psychopath. Just straight up.
You're so
He's
charming.
he's terrible. He threatened to turn the power off to the pediatrician's offices during
Um,
COVID because he was mad about something. But
wow.
it went to mediation, and this comes down to personalities again, like
Yeah.
your flower people. He's so entrenched in his views that it doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong. It's just I want to win. Um,
Yeah.
the my board wants me to win. I want to win, and all logic goes out the window. And
Yeah.
in Fred's case, it's to the tune of like we went to mediation. The board of my condo, the doctors said, you know what, let's give a little bit in the hopes that this settles things down. And then a month later, he's back at it, and it's just personality the whole way and ego.
Weirdo. No, it becomes
As a lawyer, how do you deal with that? Like you've done this much more than I have. Like how do you deal with people who are so entrenched in their positions?
it's, great question. And it does become very difficult because really, how do you make the other side see your point of view? And sometimes what makes it difficult is, the gatekeeper, their lawyer, the lawyer who's representing the other party. Is that even though as much as you're trying to be as reasonable as possible and set your position down via email and whatnot in hopes that this position will be reviewed by the other side, unfortunately, sometimes their lawyers also don't, see it from the other side. They only see it's almost like they absorb their clients' problems. And so they only see it that one way. And it becomes a disaster. I find actually what helps, believe it or not, is just to get everybody into a room. Get everybody into a room, the board members, the lawyers, the managers, get everybody into a room. And I usually like to be the one to say, okay, guys, kind of like what I do at a playground. Here's the situation as I see it. Here's one side's position. I understand this is the other side's position. Why is this your position? Why is it that you like pink more than blue? Or is more than red, excuse me. Why is it that you don't want to do these garage repairs? Why is it, this and this and this? And just let's hear them. Let's hear their reasons. And I find that when you get people into the same room whereby they can actually look at each other, talk to each other, and hear one on one, I find that you actually get results. I find that actually people actually are able to get, even if it's 1 inch closer to a middle ground, it helps.
This is why your lawyer should be a mom. And how often do you find
I
yourself telling your clients that they're just wrong, that this position is going to lead to more problems, more rage on both sides, more money? Is that a conversation you often have? Like you mentioned, lawyers sometimes get entrenched in their own side's
Yeah,
position. Do you push back on that?
all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. I call out lawyers all the time and I say, look, why are we having this conversation? We know that this can be resolved. This is how it can be resolved. But right now, by absorbing your client's problems, it's certainly it's you're prejudicing your client. And so it's tough. It's not an easy situation, that's for sure. But I
Yeah,
believe
and
that.
it's a bit different than just being on like the board of a condo where you're accountable to your homeowners because again, this is a side thing. This is a shared
Yeah,
facility is typically another asset or something else that you're managing, and you're not going to get kicked off your board. Your residents aren't going to be mad if you go really hard
right.
on this and try to get it for them. So you've got a different motivation there. I find myself in the same shoes where I've got buildings saying, "Hey, we want to win no matter what," and just saying, guys, like we do need to sit down with these people. We're going to be either living next to them or sharing a road or whatever it is.
Right.
So why do you think these situations get so difficult in the first place? Like we talked about difficult people, we talked about some motivation issues, but like what are the developers doing here, creating these
Oh
agreements? Because some of them are
my
brutally unfair.
They're brutal. They're brutal. It's so it developer has various interests. One of them, for example, sometimes the developer still wishes to be involved. Let's say, for example, they wish to own one of the buildings in the development, for example, or own some units in a condo. And so they will make sure that the agreement is in such a way that they will still have some sort of a control, whether it's over the decision-making process of the shared facilities or whatnot. Other times, developers just sometimes they don't read. Sometimes they don't read the actual
Right.
shared facilities agreement and put something down on paper and then let the parties deal with it later on. It's, to be frank, it's a very unfortunate situation because at the end of the day, it's the condos who now are dealing with the situation where, okay, where do we go from here? Especially because amending an agreement is certainly difficult.
It,
Yeah.
it is. And we kind of have this joke on the management side that the lawyers write these things just to get work later on. Like, that if you
That's
write
our
a bad enough
secret. Don't
shared
tell
agreement,
anyone.
yeah, if you write a bad enough agreement, we're all going to fight with each other and have to call you back. You know it. But yeah, I've seen some where it's literally like you've got, kind of like I mentioned before in Mississauga, you've got a couple commercial units sitting at the bottom of a residential tower, and the entrance is just from the road, and they're paying like 20% of the elevator costs. And you're
Right,
like, what? Like
right,
you
right,
have no access to the elevator. You can't use it. You don't park underground, and you're paying for this. And I find the issue with that is the condo, in that, like, let's say this hypothetical case, the condo is in a position where they've got this great deal where a bunch of their stuff's getting paid for, and they factor that into their budget. So, if that changes, they've got to raise their condo fees. And the commercial side is saying, well, we're paying for something that's unfair. So neither side wants to, like, one side really wants to change, the other side really doesn't. And
right. Based on
how
their
do you
best
force it?
interest.
Like, I've seen
Yeah,
cases where the commercial side has just stopped paying entirely. They've said, well, we're just not paying because this is unfair,
yeah,
forcing the
yeah.
condo to pursue that through their legal means.
Right. And this happens quite often actually. And the result of that, I mean, again, it depends on what the wording is in the shared facilities agreement, but oftentimes if a party defaults on their obligations to pay, the other side might have some self-help remedies, such as registering a caution or a lien against the land. And so, of course, that certainly, really gets things going and really puts that, that fire under their bum to try to resolve it. Because imagine, as a manager, you get calls from owners saying, "There's a lien on my unit," or there's a caution that's been filed. What is this? I can't get financing. I can't sell my property now. Now what happens? And so often this is a tactic in order to get the other side to, okay, come to the table, pay what you need to pay. Let's resolve this.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you find, again, you deal with this a lot. Do you find that sitting down in a room together, I think you mentioned it before, but do you
Mm.
find most of the time that helps prior to mediation, or do you see most of these just blow up over the flowers?
I've seen both. I've seen both cases. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the parties come into the room and they're so heated and everybody starts yelling at one another and then everybody walks out of the room and nothing was accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so really it depends. I think it depends, people just really have to keep an open mind. And at the end of the day, look, this is not my community. This is your community. You're the one who lives there. You're the one who has to pay the legal fees. Ultimately, this is going to come out of your maintenance fees. And so I always suggest, keep an open mind. Really do keep an open mind. Get into this with your best, with your best foot forward. But again, it's not up to me. It really is, up to the other parties. It depends what their lawyer says. Um, and the same thing can be said about mediation too, right? A lot of people go into mediation just as a check mark so that they can proceed to arbitration.
Yeah, it's just a step to get
It's just
to.
a
Right.
step. They have no desire to, to resolve the issue at mediation because in their view, they want those pink flowers and they think that they are now going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in, as awarded as costs.
In red flower, like they'd be paid in red
Yeah,
flowers, I assume, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. Here you go. We'll pay you those.
Just
We'll find out
truckloads of
4 months of
red
everything.
flowers is the legal agreement.
It's
Yeah, we
actually
always
very
say when we go
romantic.
into like a
Mhm.
negotiation, we're like, if this negotiation has gone well, if both sides leave miserable, like if one side leaves
Yeah.
happy and the other doesn't, or if both sides leave happy, something's horribly, horribly wrong and it's
Uh,
gonna, blow up later on. If you both leave relatively miserable, you've probably made a decent deal,
I,
right?
I
Because you've
tell
both
my
given up
clients
a
all
little
the
bit.
time. Yeah, I tell my clients all the time is that, it's a good deal when it's like both parties, make certain concessions and just walk away, just, okay, this is not the best, but at least we resolved it.
So
You know,
where do
you
you see the manager, the property manager's role in this? Like I can tell you where I see it, but
yeah.
from the lawyer's perspective, dealing with shared facilities, and you're sort of the, wouldn't say the gatekeeper, but you have some sway over your board sometimes. Where do you see managers fitting into this?
The managers have a very they have a very critical role. I think even more critical than lawyers do, because managers they have the direct line with the board. They see them at board meetings, they have telephone calls with them. And then, I have to see that managers actually have a lot of sway with the boards. The boards trust managers. And so whatever the manager's opinion is, sometimes that is, the boards are affected by it. And so if the manager says, you know what? The other side is wrong. They should not have, those pink flowers are wrong. They're not going to go with the aesthetic. The board will say, wow, yes, manager, you are correct. Yes, we're going to follow in your lead.
That
And
sounds
so
great. That's
oftentimes I
never happened
find,
in real life, but that sounds wonderful. There is some power that a manager has in how they frame
yeah,
it. I think the other thing to mention is a manager needs to understand the shared agreement. And that's
yes,
difficult because sometimes these things are like 40 pages of legalese and very, very hard to read. AI is great for that because sometimes you can just feed it into like chat and it will summarize it for you, or
that
your
what it
Adobe
does?
software. I'm not supposed to say that, I guess, yet, but yeah, you can do that.
No
But
idea.
understanding exactly what those terms are, and even if you can create a
Yeah.
summary, like spend the 3 hours one day, read it, and just make a spreadsheet of like, here's all the different parts of this and who's responsible for what. I find that that helps a lot because then you're reducing the number of misunderstandings that, you know, that you may see or your board might see. So if your board's looking and say, hey, they didn't pay for this or they didn't maintain the grass there,
Yeah.
you can say, hey, okay, here's what this thing actually says.
Yeah.
Let's not jump to conclusions.
So that's one way. In other ways, I also recommend to the clients, always, especially if it's, if there's new management on site, or especially if no one's ever done this, is give the shared facilities agreement, give the governing documents to your lawyer and say, hey, break it down for me. Give me a memo stating exactly, here's what is part of the shared facilities. Here's exactly how the cost is broken down. Here's the proportionate shares, who's responsible for what. Here's how decisions are made by the shared facilities committee or by the parties. Break it down for me, and then have that summary available. And then going forward, whatever decisions need to be made, you have that document to refer to.
Yeah,
And so
100%. I think
you
any way
don't
you
have
go about
to,
it,
yeah.
the quick and dirty chat GPT version or the actual proper way of doing it through your lawyer, either way, what you want to end up with is a summary, something that you can share with your boards and say, here's
Of
actually how this works.
obligations.
And then really what it comes down to is finding all of the little things that slip through the cracks in that. So like I'll give you a quick example. We have one where
Yeah.
we're having a dispute over, I think it's the maintenance of the fire system. So capital costs are dealt differently than operating costs. And so you
Mhm.
get an invoice that could fall under both. Well, how much do you pay? Do you pay the 20% or do you pay the 50%? Because, and so again, if you have reasonable people that can sit down together and get along, that's not an issue. If you have warring sides, that's a disaster that will cost you, tens of
Right,
thousands of dollars to resolve.
right.
But
And
having
it
that summary
also,
is still helpful.
absolutely, because it also comes down to how people interpret an agreement. And so sometimes agreements are drafted in such a vague manner that it's anyone's best bet.
Many of them are crafted in a vague manner. There's almost none that are not drafted that way. Um, I think the
Yeah.
rule of thumb is that it's going to be in like ridiculous legalese, but then also say nothing at the same time. And that's like your standard, and be really long. Let's just make it extra long for fun. That's your standard shared agreement.
Your
And
eyes
the
glaze
more the
over
more
by the
parties that
time,
can be involved, the better.
yeah.
Like if you have 5 condos, a retirement home, and a co-op sharing
Yeah.
a golf course, this is like, okay, perfect. Now we've got our perfect shared agreement that makes no sense to anyone. Um,
And the best is when you have those sites where you have a four-way shared agreement, and then you also have a three-way shared agreement, and then somewhere in there there's a two-way shared agreement. And at that point,
Overlapping shared agreements on
yeah,
shared agreements, and each of them have like
yeah.
6 amendments that have been made over the years. So like I had one case where we have a shared agreement with it's a hotel, and they looked through, it was a new ownership came in, they looked over years of documents, and they found from some amendment that no one had anymore, they found that the percentage that the condo was supposed to pay was actually higher and came after the condo for that. And we're like, yeah, that's real. That's registered on title. No one caught that. It hadn't been in the previous management or the previous one before that's
Right.
list of documents, but somewhere along the way in the long history of the building, it was lost, but it's real, and
Mm-hmm.
we've
Mm-hmm.
not been complying, so we have to do that now. So yeah,
Yeah.
the more complicated, the better. It's
Absolutely. But yeah, but this is why it's definitely definitely helpful to have that list of obligations and responsibilities just as a reference sheet and something that, as if the boards change, management changes, there's always the document that everybody can refer to.
yeah.
And then going a step further is that if you can also, have part of the condominium plan or a reference plan showing, okay, this area is shared. This area is shared, but this area belongs to the other party, but this area belongs to you. So if you want to
Yeah.
have your pink flowers, you can plant them right here on this little area right there.
Red flowers here, pink flowers there, and we could
Yeah.
have saved a lot of money and
Yeah.
a lot of plants. Um, yes. Yeah, if you can have the summary, if you can have the layout, that's great. I think
Yeah.
another thing is if you can arrange like regular meetings with the relevant parties. So again, if you're sharing a facility with a co-op and another condo and whatever it is, a retirement home, get everyone to come to the table once a year, or every 6 months or something, just to sit down, order some food, get to know each other, so the other people on the other side are human beings, and not mystery people making bad decisions that you can't find. So all of that's also helpful. Like you said, as a mom, get to know the other kids so that when
Yeah.
there's a fight, you can,
100%.
you know,
But Eric, that is so important what you just touched on. That is so, so, so important because in so many shared facilities, disputes, it comes out that the parties haven't met in over a year, over 2 years. And so a lot of their decision making is by email or,
yeah.
it's unbelievable. It's because of that, I think that certain problems are snowballed into something greater than they really are.
Well,
Because
it's easy to vilify people when you're just reading the emails from their lawyer, right? Which is like a
yeah,
distilled version of a distilled version of what they actually might want or feel. And so like, yeah, there's cases where if you just sit down with someone, you're like, oh, like I completely misjudged your motivation
yeah,
and your side of this. I had no idea. I expected a big battle and you're actually a nice person and great, we can just work this out. If you don't do that, you never have the chance. Now, in
well,
some
that's
cases, it
true.
doesn't matter. The person is exactly as bad as you think they are. But I think in more times than not, they're actually, it's just, you're making assumptions about people.
Yeah, not everyone's like Fred. Not everyone's like
Fred is
Fred.
special. Fred
But
is
yeah,
very special.
Fred is special. But certainly the emails from the lawyer, of course, there's a certain tone to it. And I find that when other board members read that email from the opposite lawyer, they are offended. They are offended.
Yeah.
How could they say this to us? And then, of
How
course,
could this lawyer who passed the bar take
how
this side?
dare
How
they?
could it be?
Exactly. And then that
Yeah.
just causes like complete chaos. And so this is why it's so important for the parties to actually meet. And there should be something in the shared facilities agreement that requires at least a meeting once a year, at least.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's so,
requiring is one thing, doing it is another, right? Like,
of course, of course. And the other issue becomes that the parties are not available to meet at a certain time. And so you need to really find that perfect timing that everyone's available.
and then like it says, it comes down to personalities. You can, like I think you mentioned, you can sit down with people and everyone starts screaming and walks out of the room, and
Yes.
you've now wasted, you've missed an opportunity there and probably made things worse actually. So, you got to go in, I think, understanding that you're not going to get everything you want, every
Yeah.
single time. Like I said, you got to leave sort of miserable, and then it worked okay, and you're fine.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you because again, at the end of the day, it's, living in a condo, having shared facilities, it's just, you know, there's a give and take and it just comes with it. There's a give and take. And so it's something that just the parties just need to confront it and just be okay with it. And if they're not okay with it, then perhaps maybe they should consider moving into a detached house if they
No,
can.
I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw a curveball. So what's your most complicated? And again, you can, if you need to change names and stuff because you're still working there or
Yeah.
whatever, that's fine. But the gist of it, what's your most complicated shared facility that you've ever seen?
Complicated shared facility dispute or
Either
what we call
one.
shared facilities
Give us
agreement.
something.
I would say there was a dispute whereby there was a five-way shared facilities, a four-way shared facilities, and a two-way shared facilities. And we had
Oh,
to determine cost obligations. And what happened is that The parties had a different interpretation as to what the agreement actually said. And so what happened is that the lawyers for every side reviewed all the agreements. And then the lawyers met together and we came to a resolution. We came to a compromise, if you may, that here's what this says based on our interpretation of it.
And you
It was
kind of just think like the
together.
developer's lawyer was just sitting like at a table in his basement, just writing this thing and laughing like,
He was
this will
laughing
be fun. Like,
100%.
I'm just gonna watch. I'm gonna be a fly on the wall and watch this development like burn.
Get me the popcorn. Get me the popcorn, and
Exactly.
let me just, let's watch this show. So
That sounds
yeah,
horrible. Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing that the lawyers were able to figure that out. But like I said, when you have like layers upon layers of complexity, it's just for an average board member or manager to sift through that and understand what
brutal.
you're supposed to do to be compliant with this is next to impossible.
Yeah,
Um,
your eyes would glaze over once you get to like the 10th page, and you still have like another three
I wouldn't
agreements.
get to the 10th
Yeah,
page.
right. You just chat GPT
I would just,
it.
yeah, I would throw it into chat. It would lie to me and tell me a bunch of stuff that isn't true. And then I would go to my board and be like, this
Um,
is probably okay. And then we would get into a big fight. And
yeah,
that's how we
yeah.
play that card.
It's something. I had another one actually whereby the other side was just, my God, they just took a position that this is our position and we're not moving.
Was it
We
Fred?
don't care what you say. We don't care what you say. The sky is yellow. Prove us wrong.
Hmm.
We don't care what you say.
Yeah.
That was an absolute disaster.
How do you deal with it? Let me ask you that because like I said, I had this one in Mississauga that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that as a seasoned lawyer and mom?
You try to negotiate in good faith. If you see that it's going absolutely nowhere and you've tried all you can, you submit the matter to mediation. If that fails,
Yeah.
then you go to arbitration, and that's
Did
it.
it? Did it go to arbitration?
No, this one we were lucky that we were able to settle it at mediation. And I
Mhm.
think one of the reasons why is because the issue that was in dispute, and I'm not going to say what it is because it was very fresh.
Yeah.
But the issue in dispute is not something that they it's not something that if it goes to arbitration, it's not something that they would win. We'll leave it at that. It's
Right.
not,
Okay.
it's just one of those things where it was more of a principled issue more than something that they had a right or an obligation to. And I think this is what ultimately helped us resolve the issue at mediation, is that
Right. It's just
finally understanding, yeah, that yes, they don't like it, but too bad.
yeah, you can't. I mean, it's good that that resolved itself, but you can't change people's minds over certain things. It's very difficult.
A lot of
We're
it.
that was like half an hour, very quick, but I'll leave it on this. Do you have any advice for managers who are
Yes.
dealing with complex shared facilities beyond what we've already talked about?
Um, try to if you see there's a dispute, try to escalate it quickly to your lawyer. Get your lawyer involved at an early stage and say, hey, listen, this is what the boards are, this is what they're fighting about, this is what the dispute is, before it gets out of hand. What can we do now in order to minimize the conflict? That helps a lot. That really tends to, you know, reduce the fire. I was going to say add fuel to the fire, but the opposite of that.
Take the fuel off the fire. I don't know if that's a saying. Yeah.
grab the
Grab
fire.
the fuel out of the burning fire or something. Don't burn your hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
put a
I get what you're
cover,
saying.
put a lid on top of the
Sure.
fire. There you go. Yeah, you and I should definitely not work for the fire department. That's for sure.
No, no.
No. So yeah, so get your legal counsel involved as early on as possible to avoid, the dispute, going further beyond what it needs to do. And also, one way that management can help is that, speak to the boards and say, hey guys, this is what we're fighting about. What is our position on this? Perhaps let's have a meeting with everybody. Let's discuss this. How do we move it forward? Are there any concessions?
How important is it to you?
Right. Is this a non-negotiable, or is this something that, like, okay, we can give this, but we'll take that instead. How important is that? Because sometimes the issue at the end of the day is so not important to one side, but just because the other party did something that offended them as a
Yeah.
result,
Yeah,
they're
it's emotional.
now
Also, nobody likes pink
emotional.
flowers. Come on. Anyone knows that.
I
Um,
love the color red, so
Julia, thank you so much for coming on. Once again, Julia Lurye from Horlick Condo Law, expert in shared facilities, mostly because she has three girls and has to do this every day, even after she goes home from work. But thank you for your insights and thanks for being on with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.